Hi, everyone. So, today I'm going to be talking about how the science of reading relates to pre service elementary teachers and different tools that this article talks about that bridge this research and this practice. And we kind of touched on this in class a little bit last week. So, I was really excited to get to my podcast. And even though it is for pre service teachers and talks a lot about pre service teachers, I think this is really valuable information to take in for us as future literacy coaches and for some of us just going into our first year of teaching. So I think there's a lot of nuggets we can pick out of here in whatever role we're going to next. So that kind of bleeds into why is this relevant to us as literacy coaches and teachers? So these statistics really blew my mind and they also broke my heart. But it was exciting to read on to see different practices along with what we've already learned so that we can help with these literacy rates. So, just some data really quickly. The National Assessment of Educational Progress data showed that only 35% of fourth graders read at or above the proficient level of reading. And critically, just about 34% couldn't read with even basic skill. And again, that is fourth grade. So, showing lots of deficits already in reading. So, again, why this is important. And 47% of fourth graders in poverty and 65% of ELs fell short of just the basic skill levels of just basic reading and writing skills as shown on the test that they were given. Early reading challenges are linked to higher odds of later special education referrals, grade retention, school dropouts, and even involvement in crime. So I think it's really important a lot of times why we reflect back on why this is important. And I think this right here is just enough to just stop and make us reflect on our experiences so far. And then lastly, just emphasizing that science of reading. Anytime I use the SOR or I say SOR, I mean science of reading, just so you know. So, science of reading principles, it's unlikely to raise skills for two reasons. One, the science of reading literature shows that effective reading instruction is really complex and individualized, as we already know. Second, the broader learning sciences literature suggests that because of this complexity, teachers need a lot of intensive, intentional practice and coaching. That's where we come in as literacy coaches to learn and teach reading, because as we go on you'll see there's not a lot of practice and focus on science of reading in pre-service for pre-service teachers. And I know that was also part of my experience, just jumping ahead a little. So yeah. So, with these statistics, what is the proposed solution to help increase our data and students' learning? Because it's all about, making sure our students are up to speed and they are where they need to be academically, emotionally, and socially. So, to do this week, to solve this problem, pre service teachers need more deliberate practice with tools that show them how to use science of reading ideas in actual classrooms. I know with me, when I first walked into Debbie's classroom and she started talking about science of reading, I was thinking, what is this woman talking about? And now that we're so in depth with all these reading theories and applications of these theories into our practicum, I know that would be so valuable to have known as a pre-service teacher. And I know a bunch of my friends who went out in first year teaching, I've talked to them about science of reading and they're like, I want to learn more. What is this? So I think it's valuable for pre-service teachers, but also first year and new teachers. Also, to this end, we described two effective in-service teacher professional development programs, professional development, from their research teams that are actually framed around this model called the Lattice model, which I'll talk about later, and key principles from the science of learning that improve early and elementary teacher reading instruction and student outcome. So, specifically, what does this article say about the science of reading? It doesn't give a definition of science of reading just because this is more generalized on pre-service teachers and focused in on specific tactics and ideas to implement into learning programs and things that we can use as literacy coaches. So that's why there's not an exact definition. But the science of reading argument, and I'll just read it from this, but it holds that A or first High quality empirical research has provided an accurate, well operationalized, feasible array of strategies for teaching all students to read in English. Proponents often cite, the National Reading Panel's final report, which identified the 5 different things, which is phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocab, and comprehension as pillars of reading success. So here going a lot, it kind of bends me back to the simple view of reading when it's talking right there, that first little chunk. And then it says further, science of reading advocates have asserted that this synthesis clarified what works, but that teachers do not use the identified effective practices in one or more of these 5 areas. So going back to that phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocab, and comprehension with enough frequency or quality, leading to students' persistent reading difficulties. So, again, it's focusing on different tactics because a lot of teachers it's not been shown that they've used certain techniques. So, they wanted to provide them with new techniques so they can implement that directly into the classroom so that we can help students with those 5 different areas I talked about a minute ago. So the article states a couple of ideas to improve the 5 different areas of reading, which is that phonemic awareness, vocab comprehension, fluency, all of that. So first, it says they want to pull from more specific guidelines for practice, which I thought this was interesting, includes practices from International Dyslexia Association as alternatives that could improve classroom reading instruction. So I never would have thought of this. So I thought it was really interesting that they were telling us, just as pre-service and in-service teachers, that we could look to this International Dyslexia Association for ideas. And I think that's, I went through and looked at a couple of them, and I thought they were really valuable and things that I could see using in the classroom. Next, organizations such as the National Council on Teacher Quality have highlighted a lack of coursework and hands-on experience for the science of reading for pre-service teachers. So in order to improve this, they went back and wanted to look at how much they're focusing on science of reading in pre-service teachers, and they found that there's not enough hands-on experience and not enough coursework in science of reading. So in order to help students reading later, they want teachers or students who are going to be teachers to focus on science of reading early on so that we can help those students when we get into the classroom, which I totally agree with. And just some more perspectives from this article. So some science of reading advocates have critiqued insufficient classroom emphasis on phonics. So that reminds me a lot of Adam's view of reading. So again, going back to that simple view of reading, whereas others have argued for increased focus on comprehension. So again, that reminds me of the top-down model that we talked about. So really, again, there's that reading wars fight of there's not enough of bottom up, there's not enough of top down. That's, again, where you can see that coming head to head. Background knowledge, that's another thing we talked about. Also, balanced literacy, another thing we talked about in class. So again, you can see this whole idea of reading wars coming to head where they're not really moving forward, instead they're just fighting about what to do instead of trying to figure out a solution. More focus on literacy learning and instruction, so less fighting and more focus on just overall literacy learning and instruction. And the Lattice model of reading. I'm going to go ahead and go because I'm running out of time. So I'm going to talk about the Lattice model of reading development, which is something new, and I actually really like it. But it's this model of reading that this article is proposing we use and we share with pre-service teachers and even share in professional development as literacy coaches. So like I said, I really like this. So I'm going to try to explain it the best I can. So this model incorporates not only the National Reading Panels model, but also the lexical hypothesis model. So it's kind of a combination of multiple models you'll see and the bioecological systems model. So as I go on, you'll see it's this huge amalgamation of ideas. This Lattice model focuses on a lot of text and coding-based processes, linguistic processes, social emotional processes, decoding, encoding, automaticity, and other skills focused on decoding and working on print. So that reminds me a lot of Adams and more of a bottom-up approach, but in this model, the linguistic processes can be conceptualized as two different clusters of skills. So it even goes further. So we don't just stop at the very bottom, but it goes a lot more deeper and it's a lot more complex. So it focuses on deeper in word knowledge or deeper in higher level processing. So semantics, syntax, morphology, pragmatics, and academic knowledge. So again, it's a lot deeper rooted than just the simple view of reading, which I'll go into more in a little bit. But this model, this Lattice model, also mentions that the cognitive regulatory processes demands interleaved focus on instruction. So there's a lot of focus on instruction, which you'll see in the visual I have. And students gradually learn to read. It's not just don't just throw them in, but they gradually learn to read. And the goal is comprehension, as is all the other reading theories we've talked about. And there's a lot of work through this model. On the surface, like I said, it seems like it's a simple view of reading with its focus on code and comprehension, but it grows into this huge idea of reading, and it has a lot of subcomponents. It's very dynamic. There's a lot of reciprocal relationships between comprehension and coding and back and forth, social emotional learning. There's a lot going on. It's a big, like I said, amalgamation of all the different theories we've learned so far. And one thing I want to make sure I point out, there's a big link between students' maturity and experience from home, from school, and just society. So you can pull in a lot with critical literacy. You can pull in a lot with social emotional learning, and you can pull a lot from home. It reminds me of the transactional view of learning we've talked about. So it's this big amalgamation of all of these things. I know I'm going to keep saying that and I sound like a record that's broken, but just to keep reminding you guys, it's everything put together. And also, I really want to make sure there is a social, emotional, and cognitive component of this process. So it's not just about academics, but it is about where kids are coming from and what they've already learned, what motivates them, what are their goals. There's a lot more going on than just academics with this, which is why I really like this model. So here's the model. It goes from left to right, so at the top and the bottom, and this is all happening kind of simultaneously. So at the top, you have home and community influences, and you just go, that's always embedded, so that's why it's this one long line. And then it's this timeline at the very bottom from early to middle childhood over here. So right where we are is elementary, so right here. And you're constantly growing and maturing, as this model notes, so that's why this is a constant line as well. So at the same time, we have code and text-based processes, linguistic processes, and then again, social, emotional, and cognitive processes that are all working together at the same time. And we move over to instruction where we're teaching, and that's where reading and understanding is happening. So all these processes are pouring together into this reading and understanding while instruction is going on. So after we've understood this, we move on to the next stage of our maturity, next stage of our maturity. And we're just repeating that process, same process over and over and again, constantly having that home and community influence being poured into us as we are growing, as we are maturing with coding, with linguistic processes, social, emotional, and cognitive processes. So we're constantly reading and understanding. We constantly have instruction, and we have these outside influences pouring in and these internal schema and files pouring in so that we are growing as well. Sorry, I pressed the wrong button. So how does this relate to pre-service teachers or even new teachers? Because I think this is really important because we can use this and the Lattice model, especially to these new teachers as literacy coaches. So first, we need to make sure teacher education programs are learner focused. So we need to know what candidates are able to do and where they can go from, especially our new teachers, like where are they coming from, what can they do, and what do we need to work on. Next, we need to make sure that this is knowledge-centered, meaning that new information should be presented coherently and with a clear connection to real-world classrooms and curriculum. So for our first-year teachers, when we're coaching, we need to be really clear and coherent with our goals and how we can relate, SOR to their classrooms. I'm just going to go ahead and skip over here because I'm running out of time and way over. Sorry, Debbie. But we eventually get to two different interventions that could be used to help students and help increase our science of reading knowledge. And the first one is the individualizing student instruction, ISI, or story talk. So one, ISI is more grades 1 through 3, and story talk is more kindergarten pre-K. So those are two different ways you can help with the science of reading in your classroom. And I'm just going to go ahead and dive right into them. So, what is Story Talk? Story Talk, which is developed by Wasik and colleagues, which is who helped write this article, is a year-long preschool professional development intervention. Yes, professional development that targets vocab instruction and classroom organization. So, the centerpiece of this intervention is story maps, lessons for whole group book read alouds, which I love that, and it's designed around high-quality trade storybooks, which I also love that. The story maps first guide teachers in presenting 5 target vocab words from the book, sharing kid-friendly definitions, of course. Then the story map offers teachers several open-ended questions, so really building up those inferential skills to ask before, during, and after the reading to promote conversation about the vocab words and even more, just to go deeper. These questions grow in complexity over 3 different reads, so there's 3 reads for the book that is chosen. And then finally, the story map includes 5 play-based extension activities with open-ended questions. There's a lot of focus on centers. There's a lot of focus on play-based extension activities, group work, one-on-one work with the use of all revolving around this book and this vocabulary, which I think is incredible for our little kids because they need this support early on. But it doesn't need to be too academic because they are so little. They need to have fun with it and learn that reading can be fun and reading is applicable to play, to growth. Teachers attend in this PD. Teachers attend 5 2-hour group workshops over the year, so it's a 1-year program, as well as one-to-one coaching, which I love, twice per month. So that's about 35 hours of learning centered support. So it's not too bad. It could be intense for some based on your schedule, but I think it's a really good program to look into. So, just some results of this story talk learning based program in pre K and even kindergarten, they use this in kindergarten, showed that teachers who had this story talk increased the global quality of their instruction, just overall classroom environment, and they perform better on a picture vocabulary test than other preschoolers, statistically, a lot better. And also, just to wrap up Story Talks focus on maps, and related coaching provides teachers with clear step-by-step guidance on how to use practices from this research to support linguistic processes and all of those other things that we talked about in the Lattice model. So it's not just academic, it's this true transaction of learning, but also an academic exchange as well. So it's a really cool process. So next for grades 1 through 3 is ISI. So this model is actually also a year-long PD intervention. Like I said, grades 1 through 3. The centerpiece of this intervention is different in Story Talk in that it's an assessment to instruction program. And it's teacher-friendly, so it's learning-centered for the students, that recommends the number of minutes of various types, so text-based or linguistic, of reading instruction that would best support each of the students in the classroom based on their recent standardized assessment scores. So going from scores that you already have given them. A2I, so that assessment program, offers large group, small group, or individual activities through which students receive instruction, and essentially providing teachers with ready-to-use building blocks for individualized lessons. And I love this because I love individualized lessons. I do not think we need to put our students in any kind of box. So I think that this is really good that we're opening up to individualized lessons for wherever the students are coming from, culturally or academically. ISI teachers normally receive 2 days of whole group training and coaching as well. So what the statistics of this showed was that in grades 1 through 3, students who were in an ISI classroom had stronger decoding skills in first grade, second grade, and third grade, and they outperformed peers on comprehension as well. And I really liked this. It wasn't extremely specific, but I really liked ISI because again, it's individualized. So it's giving students lessons based on where they're coming from academically, culturally, and socially. So I think that's so, excuse me, I think that's so important because students really feel seen and valued where they're coming from, and where they're coming from, they know is it's okay. Like that, I'm not here. I'm getting, the needs, we're meeting the needs of them, whatever that is. So I think that's really valuable and something that's not practiced a lot now, especially with, things like wit and wisdom and so on and so forth. I could go on a lot about that. So just in conclusion, some further research would need to be established how StoryTalk, ISI, or any other effective in-service teacher professional development models for PD could be used with in-service teachers, literacy coaches, or pre-service teachers. So it kind of talked about all three in the end in this article to advance the leveraging practices of this PD. They suggest design principles that could guide the development of new approaches to bring SOR to pre-service teachers. In order for pre-service teachers to have time to practice and receive feedback, they need things like these story maps or A2I to be introduced. So they're really pushing this ISI and story map to be introduced in these pre-service programs. Next, the Lattice model, which I really like that model, emphasizes the interdependence of cognitive and social emotional processes, text and code-based processes, and linguistic processes. It is ultimately a combination of many reading processes. So I just want to make sure I emphasize like it's not just one or the other. It's a combination of a lot of different things we've learned about already. And third, the tools and strategies that we use should be systematically revisited again during student teachers for pre-service teachers. And for in-service teachers, we need to make sure we go back and revisit this the first few years, and even whenever you feel like you want to go back and reflect, which I know we do a lot of. And in particular, the traditional focus we need to make sure is on key practices of SOR. So if anyone would like to just dive into this article, send me an email, and I will be more than happy to send you a link. Sorry, this was really long, but thank you guys for listening. I learned a lot, and I hope you did too.